everybody, welcome back to The Hobby Musician. You're joining us today as we work ourselves through the most ambitious mini-series that we've ever attempted here on the channel. We are currently building 2 guitars completely from scratch. We're using just normal tools you might have around the house, and we're using entirely salvaged or scavenged wood as our material. Now don't worry, if this is the first time you're joining us, click the link at the top right now and that'll open up a playlist that I've put together with every single episode in order, so you can go back, you can get caught up on everything we've done, or you can jump around to just the specific project that might most match what you're doing right now yourself. Well, today's episode is going to be all about the wiring, why we decided to do certain things, how we did certain things. But a quick note about that, I'm not talking about the pickups themselves. We did build our very own custom pickups from scratch, but we covered that in entirety in its own episode, so you can find that in the playlist. Today is specifically just about where we put the control pots, where we got them, and what approach we did, and some tips and tricks along the way. And just like we do in every video, if you see us using parts or tools throughout this episode, you can find some affiliate links down below, and those links will take you directly to the exact products we're using here, so you can give this a try on your own projects. Okay, so how did we approach this? Well, one of the very first things I did is, since this is an entirely custom build, we have the creative freedom to decide exactly how we want things to work. We can choose how the controls will work, but the first thing I did was also I wanted to choose aesthetically how the controls would look. So if you look at the front of the bass, one of the things that I liked on this project, I knew that it was going to have kind of this vibe of like natural wood, real simplistic. So I wanted to keep everything to just some knobs. I didn't want to have selector switches or anything like that, just visually on the front. So that made me kind of lean towards maybe more of like a jazz bass style, where you have a dedicated volume control for the neck pickup, a dedicated volume for the bridge, and then one master tone. And then our input jack. I also liked kind of laying out, when I made my templates in the first place, I laid out where everything was going to go, and then I just sketched on here visually, holding up the knobs. So when I ordered the knobs and they came in, I just set the knobs on the front, not connected to anything, to kind of get a sense, and I moved them around. I liked kind of this curve, like more of a semicircle that almost matches the curve of the body. And then I just sketched out little circles of where I wanted them to go once I kind of made my final decision. I also put the input jack on the front of the instrument. You can see here, some instruments, it'll go on the actual edge. I chose this because the kits that I ended up buying didn't have any of the bigger face plates in them. So I was going to be limited to the hole size of just what the washer could cover. And I knew that if I drilled a bigger hole into the side, I was going to need something to mount it, and I just didn't have it in the kit. So that also kind of led me to wanting to put everything on the front of the instrument. Okay, well, once I had the decisions made, now I needed to start thinking about those kits and specifically which ones to get. A note about this is, if you start looking and you want to buy a wiring kit for yourself, tons of options are out there. There are companies that offer pre-assembled wiring kits for every style of guitar, bass throughout the decades. But I will mention that sometimes, depending on which company you go with, not mentioning any names, you might end up paying more or less, just for the name that comes along with those kits. Now, not a sponsor of the video or anything, but the kits that I ended up going with were from The Art of Tone. And that company puts together kits just like I described, but when I was comparing the components of the kits themselves, the quality of the pots, these are the high quality alpha pots, their price point for the exact same materials, when I was comparing those to other places, they just came in, they were more affordable for the exact same quality that you could get in more expensive kits. So like I said at the beginning of the video, I'll put the link that I used to get these directly below the video if you're interested in getting them yourself. Well, when they came, I just had to make sure that I was ready to kind of strategize and wire them all together. And that's where we're going to talk about some of the first tips of this. If you've never done this before, it really does benefit you to start to make a really low-tech, low-budget template out of some cardboard. So you can see here, this is just a bean-shaped piece of cardboard that I cut out. I actually used the box that the kits came in. I just cut it out of the side of the shipping box. But the reason you're going to want to do this, you can see I've poked holes in it. When I cut this out, I cut it out so that it was small enough that I could completely place it down into the cavity. So we routed out this cavity. I placed this down in here before I started wiring anything, and I drew with a pen. You can kind of see the lines here. I drew outlines of exactly where the holes were physically in the body. When I drilled through and made the holes, this little piece of cardboard now had the exact spacing of where all the holes were going to be. So when the kit arrived and I pulled out the wiring diagram and I was going to start to wire up things, the best thing to do first is to put all of the pots into the cardboard template that you made, because this will hold them physically the exact distances that they're going to be when they're inside, the finished product. Well, this means that every time you cut a wire, every time you make a solder, every time you bend that wire and move it around, it is going to be physically exactly identical to when you put it in here, so you can do tons of wiring ahead of time outside of the guitar. This means your access, you can kind of move things around. Your soldering iron isn't going to burn the wood or drip solder on things that you've nicely polished. This is the biggest tip that I learned a long time ago, is do most of your wiring out here. Now certainly you can't do everything. So when you install this, you're going to have to do some finishing wiring. You're going to have to take the pickup wires that are coming through, and you'll have to install these and then wire the pickups to it. But that honestly is like a few connections, when the majority of your connections you can make ahead of time using these cardboard templates. Then the rods just literally pull out very easily. Everything's held in place, and then you just pop it in here, easy peasy. Now you see here, this is the harness for our second bass. We're building two simultaneously, so I put together one so I could show you, and then this is the pre-wired harness that I'm going to put into our 4-string when it goes. Okay, so I had those wiring things ready ahead of time. Now the thing that I did right before I installed them was, you can kind of see in here, if you look at the shiny copper surface, when this was empty, it just, all you could see was copper. And you might have noticed earlier when I was showing you the cover for this, I also put copper tape on the bottom of this. You can see that the copper tape goes all the way almost to the edge of this, and I flipped it over on here. So when this gets screwed back in here, it'll make a electrical connection, and this entire cavity is going to be covered in copper conductive tape. Now, you may have seen other videos that talk about this, but the purpose, this is not strictly necessary. It's not like the bass won't work if we don't do this. But I've learned long ago that using copper tape and creating a shielded electronics cavity really helps reduce unwanted electrical noise. Noise and interference can come from bright stage lights, it can come from other equipment, signals running through cables. But copper shielding, if you do it correctly, and what you do once you have the cavity taped up with your copper tape, they make paint for this. They do make a conductive shielding paint. Personally, I don't ever use it. I have just found the tape is super easy, very nice to work with, and you don't have to wait for it to dry, and it's just, look, choose what you want for yourself, but I'm putting links to the copper tape below because I've found that that's just the easiest one to use. But after you've got it on there, all you have to do is solder a wire that connects, that solders to the copper tape in some location, and the other end of that wire needs to just solder to the ground. You've got to solder it to the same ground that you're wiring up all of your, your circuit here. By connecting it to the same ground as the circuit, This metal cage, in terms of physics, you're creating a Faraday cage, and it's that electrical protection or shield that is what's stopping any extra, external noise and interference from getting into your circuit. So wire up everything, take care. We've talked in other videos about wiring itself. If you're brand new to wiring and you see a wiring diagram like this, you might get overwhelmed. You say, I don't know how to do all this, it's just too much. The tip is just take it one wire at a time. Look at a diagram, find one end of a black line, trace it to the other end of a black line, figure out which part of which pot it connects to, and just do it once. Then circle that one, check it off, cross it off, whatever's easiest. And if you do one wire at a time, before you know it, you're going to have the whole circuit wired together. So at the end of all of that, we started out with our wiring harness, got everything pre-done as much as we could, popped it in here, and once we finished our pickups from that other episode, I snaked those wires through here. We had drilled all of the connecting holes. When the cavities were open, we just drilled angled holes that connected the gap, underneath that pickup, drilled through it, or actually down this way. It's upside down for me right now. So we drilled down and drilled the connecting holes, so the ground wire is underneath the bridge, and then we have our holes that we fed our wires through from the pickups. Connected those last couple of wires after it was in here, so I didn't run the risk of damaging the finish or anything on here. And that is all it takes for us to go from a completely free and creative starting process to a final finished wired instrument. So with that, I hope you got something out of today's episode. Thank you for watching, and as always, until next time, play on, my friends, play on.